I'm Brittany. This is Wei Ying, and welcome to Gaywatch, where we watch gay things. Today, we get to start a brand new series. We get to start Husky and his white cat Shizun, also known as ErHa. And let me tell you, I have heard, well, okay, I haven't actually heard very many things about, because I stay violently away from spoilers, so I haven't actually heard many things other than the requisite. The trigger list is like 10 miles long and all of that jazz. And I have done my due diligence in respect to what I know I can and cannot handle in very specific instances, but we'll get to that in a second. When I say I've heard a lot about ErHa, I mean that everybody keeps mentioning it. Everybody keeps telling me about it. Everybody keeps asking, when are you going to read ErHa? When are we going to read ErHa? And I held vote after we finished the last MXTX series that I had to read, the Villain Self-Saving System. And wouldn't you know, ErHa won. So here we are. I've got a couple of notes that I have literally had to write down so that I remember that I have to say this because I'm very ADD. So I have a couple of bullet points that are very important for this series. First and foremost, here's how this is going to work, because this mother is long. There's like 11 volumes or something like that, and not all of them are even released yet. So how this series is going to work on this channel, given that even the individual volumes are longer than what I've seen for most danmei novels from Seven Seas, here's what we're going to do. We're going to do this 2 volumes at a time, because that's roughly the equivalent of like a trilogy of another series. So we're going to do 2 volumes, and then I'm going to hold another vote, and then we're going to read like the entirety of another series, because they all tend to be 2 or 3 books. And what have you. And then we're going to come back to this. So we're going to hop back and forth. This will also give the series plenty of time to actually release all 11 volumes. And then that way it's not just this for the next, year solid or what have you. So we're doing volumes 1 and 2 back to back. We obviously start volume 1 today. But before we do, a couple of bullet points that I have for you guys. Trigger warnings. I would be shocked if you didn't know that this series has a lengthy list of trigger warnings. A very lengthy list of trigger warnings. Even if you are brand new to this series, you probably know about this. Go look at them. I think I glanced at some of them a while back, and I can't remember them, just to get a feel for what I even might be in for. Please go read them. If you are at all triggered by kind of basically anything, this is what I hear, a very extreme series. Please, for the love of God, go read the trigger warnings. I fling myself mostly blind into situations like this by design. 1, it's a better reaction for you guys, and 2, my hard lines tend to be very specific and somewhat extreme, so I am generally safe. And even then, when I get, if I am bothered by, triggered, or what have you, I do not risk any like real immediate danger to myself or my being. Very fortunately, I consider myself very lucky. Otherwise, doing this job would be a lot more difficult. So I am doing this because I am very uniquely suited to do this. You need to take care of yourself and make sure that you are aware of at least the potential topics that we are about to get into, because they are vast from what I hear. If anybody knows about a full, like chapter by chapter breakdown of trigger warnings that are to be found in each chapter, please, for the love of God, link me. Gaywatch has a Tumblr. Go drop it on the Tumblr somewhere. I would love to put that in the description for these live streams so that people have a nice handy reference. I can't go looking for them because spoilers, but if you know about it, please link me. This goes without saying, but Obviously, I am not obligated to enjoy or like everything I react to. That would be a little bit of an unreasonable expectation. Since this is a brand new series from a brand new author that goes to a whole lot of different places, I'm reasonably sure that I will enjoy this series enough to finish it, but just in case I don't, not a big deal. No harm, no foul. Everybody has their own personal tastes. Everybody can enjoy or not enjoy whatever they want. Not a big deal. If I need to stop reading this series for whatever reason, either if I'm not enjoying it or it does wander into some territory that I simply cannot read on, I obviously reserve the right to stop at any point that's good for me. Just like I would expect and encourage you to stop whenever you need to, for whatever reason. That kind of goes without saying, but I feel better being very upfront about that, just so that we're all on the same page, right? And last thing, oh no, I covered everything right in there. Yeah. In terms of trigger warnings, there was only one in particular that I had to talk to a couple of patrons of mine about, just to make sure, because I have a very detailed line about one of these trigger warnings, and it's pretty easy to be on the side where I'm okay with it and be on the side where I'm not okay with it. I have done my due diligence, and to my knowledge, I should be okay with it. So once again, I'm reasonably certain that I am ultimately going to be okay with this series. But I just need to toss up the requisite warnings and notifications just in case. Now that all of that has been said, let us crack open Volume 1 of ErHa, about a tyrant who gets reborn. That is about the extent of my knowledge. I hear Chapter 1 is a little bit of a doozy. So, let's find out, shall we? If you're new here, we usually read for about an hour and a half to 2 hours and cover about 40 to 50 pages per session. And these streams, they used to happen Monday, Wednesday, and sometimes Monday, Wednesday, Friday. They will now be happening on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So, I am also very deeply American, and as I've gotten generally better at my American pronunciation of Chinese names and locations, bear with me. It's gonna be a learning process for a brand new series. I apologize. We all know that Chinese is a very difficult language, especially for English speakers. But as I encounter names and locations, that is when I will look them up after the stream. If I do it the other way around, I risk spoilers, and I have to be deeply averse of spoilers. All right. Chapter 1 is called This Venerable One Dies. I am so happily nervous. Hang on. Let me click to where I can see the conversation, but not my face. That's what butterflies feel like. Okay. Before Mo Ran became an emperor, people were always calling him a dog. The villagers called him a damn mutt, his cousin called him a stupid cur, and the woman who took him in outdid them all, calling him a bitch's whelp. Mind you, there were other dog-related metaphors that weren't so bad. For example, his one-night stands always grumbled with feigned petulance that his energy in bed was like that of an alpha dog. Though his words were sweet enough to tempt the soul, the weapon between his legs had lethality enough to make them feel like they were about to lose their lives. This is in the second paragraph of an incredibly long series. This is the vital information that you need to know up front before we continue. But after the fact, they would turn around and boast about that same thing, to the point that the entire pleasure district knew this Mo fellow was both a handsome face and a good lay. All who had tried him out found themselves quite fulfilled, and those who hadn't yet were sorely tempted. It must be said that all those names were incredibly spot on. Mo Ran was indeed very much like a dumb, tail-wagging dog. Only once he became emperor of the cultivation world did these epithets disappear in a flash. One day, a small sect from a faraway land offered Mo Ran the gift of a puppy. The puppy had a grayish-white coat and a flame-shaped mark upon its forehead, somewhat like that of a wolf, but it was only as large as a melon, and it looked like it had the sentience of one, all chubby and round as it was. It nonetheless seemed to think itself a rather mighty creature, and ran all around the great hall with abandon. Several times it tried to catch a glimpse of the calm and unruffled presence on the throne, making attempts to scale the high steps, but its legs were too short, and after multiple defeats, it finally abandoned its efforts. Mo Ran stared at that energetic yet seemingly brainless ball of fur for a long while before suddenly letting out a laugh, calling it a damn mutt as he did so. The puppy soon grew to become a big dog, the big dog became an old dog, and eventually the old dog became a dead dog. Mo Ran closed his eyes, then opened them. His life, filled as it had been with the ebb and flow of prestige and shame, ups and downs, felt like it had gone by in a blink. Before he knew it, 32 years had passed. He'd grown bored of his dalliances, and everything had lost its flavor and appeal. In recent years, the familiar faces around him had faded away one by one, and even that flame-marked dog had passed on to the heavens. He felt that soon it would be time for him as well. Time for it all to come to an end. He plucked a plump, smooth-skinned grape from his bowl of fruit and began to peel off its purple skin with unhurried movements. His actions were easy and practiced, like that of a tribal chief in his camp, peeling off the robes of his exotic concubine, languid and lazy. The lustrous flesh of the grape quivered lightly in his fingertips, the juice seeping out in exquisite purple, vibrant like sunset-limbed clouds carried in the beaks of wildfowl across the sky, like haitan blossoms entering slumber in late spring, or of a bloodstain. I'm not sure I can swear this early on in the stream, but damn! We have some description in this novel, ladies and gentlemen. Deeply effective. He scrutinized his fingers as he chewed and swallowed the heavy sweetness of the grape before lifting his gaze with detached indolence. It's about time now, he thought to himself. About time for him to go to hell. Mo Ran, courtesy name Wei Yu, the first emperor of the cultivation world. It had not been an easy path to reach where he now stood. It had taken not only outstanding spiritual power, but a thick-skinned shamelessness and disregard for what others thought. Before he'd come along, the 10 great sects of the cultivation world had been locked in a stalemate, fighting non-stop over their divided territory. With the sects clashing against one another like so, none had been able to emerge as a front-runner to rule the world and call the shots. Besides, the sect leaders were all learned people. Even if they had wanted to grant themselves titles, they were too wary of chroniclers' pens, too self-conscious of how they would be portrayed in the annals of history. Mo Ran was different. He was a scoundrel. What others never dared to do, he'd gone and done it all. Drinking the finest, fieriest wines of the mortal realm, marrying the most beautiful woman in the world, first establishing himself as Taishanjun? Yeah, that feels about right. Leader of the cultivation world, then declaring himself emperor. All bowed before him. Any who refused to kneel were slaughtered, one and all. In his years of tyranny, the cultivation world was drowned in blood, and desolation and starvation spread throughout the land. Countless vigilantes died martyrs' deaths, and Rufeng's sect of the 10 great sects was completely annihilated. Later still, even Mo Ran's esteemed teacher was unable to escape his demonic claws. In a final battle with Mo Ran, his once beloved disciple defeated him, then imprisoned him in his palace. No one knew what had become of the man thereafter. kind of fitting that Villain Self-Saving System was the last book I read from MXTX before this one. A land of clear rivers and calm seas, once great, now lay smothered under the miasmic haze of pandemonium. Excuse me? I'm rereading that sentence. A land of clear rivers and calm seas, once great, now lay smothered under the miasmic haze of pandemonium. Okay. This is a writer, everybody. That's a writer. That dog of an emperor, Mo Ran, was not well read, and what's more, he cared little for taboos or inhibitions. As such, during the time in which he was in power, there was no shortage of absurdity. For example, the titles of his reigning years. The first 3 years of his reign, he named Wang Ba, tortoise. We have our first footnote. Can I speak? We have our first footnote. Wang Ba, tortoise, is also slang for cuckold and bastard. Tortoises also represent long life. The implication is that Mo Ran chose this name because 1, he felt like it, and 2, he wanted to show that he was above rules and etiquette. 3, he hoped that his rule would be a long and lasting one. All right. He had thought of it while feeding fish by the pond. I love it. He so casually thought of this clever and shameless title of those years while doing something so casual. He was just like, oh, I think I'll call it, cuckold, bastard, The second set of 3 years he titled Gua, or croak. That did not come with a footnote. I thought it did. The reason being that he'd heard frogs croaking in the garden during the summer months and believed them to be inspiration sent from the heavens, something not to be taken for granted. The country's scholars believed that no reigning titles could ever be more tragic than tortoise and croak, but alas, they underestimated Mo Wei Yu. In the third set of 3 years, a restlessness stirred throughout the realm. Whether they were Buddhists, Taoists, or spiritual cultivators, the righteous people of the Jianghu could no longer endure Mo Ran's tyranny, and they began to rise up in rebellion. And so, after much consideration and contemplation, after tossing aside draft after draft, Mo Ran eventually came up with a title that shook the heavens and earth, that made gods and ghosts weep alike. Jiba. Cease battle. This has a footnote. Jiba, meaning cease battle, shares a pronunciation with the vulgar slang for dick. This is why we read the footnotes, everybody. The title's metaphorical meaning was all well and good. This emperor, the first of his kind, had used every single last drop of brain power he possessed to come up with it, and he had based it off of the fortuitous phrase, "Lay down your arms and cease battle." It was only that the phrase was exceedingly awkward when spoken out loud in the common context. It was all the more awkward for those who couldn't read and could therefore only go off the way it sounded. The first year was called Jiba Yuanyan, the first year of cease battle. Another footnote. Yuan, meaning the first of, shares pronunciation with Yuan for ball. I'm sensing a theme. But why did it have to sound like the year of cock and balls? The second year was called the second year of cock. Then the third year of cock. There were those who, behind locked doors, cursed and said, "This is ridiculous. You might as well just go ahead and call it the age of the cock." Oh, don't dare him. I've known him for 5 pages? Do not dare him. Do not even float the possibility That way, when you want to ask a man's age, all you'll have to do is ask the vintage of his cock. 100-year-old man could just be called Centennial Cock. Why is this guy hilarious? And also, once again, don't tempt, will you? Don't do it. After 3 agonizing years, the time finally came for the reigning title, Jiba Cease Battle, to be replaced. The world waited anxiously to see what His Imperial Majesty the Emperor would come up with for the 4th round. However, by this time, Mo Ran had lost all interest in such matters, because it was in this year that the unrest simmering throughout the lands finally came to a boil. After nearly a decade of weathering Mo Ran's tyranny, those righteous people, heroes and vigilantes, one and all, finally gathered to form an army, millions strong, and banded together against the Emperor, Mo Ran. The cultivation world needed no emperor, let alone a tyrant like him. After many months of bloody battles, the rebel army finally came to the foot of Xishang, the foot of Xishang Peak, located within the region of Sichuan. This was a place of steep, perilous mountain bluffs, surrounded throughout the year by curling streams of clouds and mist. At the very summit of it all stood Mo Ran's grand and majestic palace. It was too late to turn back now, and their goal of overthrowing the tyrant was but a single strike away. However, this last stretch was also the most treacherous. Though the shining beacon of victory lay before their eyes, the previously unassailable unity of the army, joined together in common opposition to Mo Ran, began to fracture. They were all aware that once the old regime was overthrown, a new order would need to be established. Nobody wanted to spend all of their energy in this last stretch. Thus, nobody volunteered to spearhead the final charge to lead them up the mountain. They were all afraid that this cunningly vicious tyrant would suddenly drop from the skies, bare his glinting bestial teeth, and rip apart all those who dared to surround and destroy his palace, shredding them to pieces. A fair guess, I'm assuming. Mo Ran's spiritual powers are unfathomable, and the man himself is treacherous, one person said, face grim. We must be cautious, lest we fall for his traps. All the leaders chimed in with their agreement. At that moment, an exceptionally handsome young man with proud, haughty features stepped forward. He wore a set of light armor in blue, with silver trim, and a belt embellished with a lion's head, and his hair was fastened in a high ponytail, secured at the base with an exquisite silver hairpin. We've already come to the foot of the mountain, the young man said with an ugly expression. What are you all milling about for, so reluctant to go up? Are you waiting for Mo Ran to come down himself? What a bunch of cowardly good-for-nothings. His words ignited a flurry of responses from the gathered. What are you talking about, Shui Gongji? What do you mean by cowardly? A soldier must always be prudent and cautious. If we were to be as brash and reckless as you, who would take responsibility if something untoward were to happen? Shui Gongji is the darling of the heavens, and we are but mere commoners, another person sneered tauntingly. If the darling of the heavens can't wait to fight the emperor of the mortal realm, then by all means, please be the first to go up the mountain. We'll set up a feast down here by the foot to await your gracious return with Mo Ran's head. Wouldn't that be nice? That comment had gone too far. One of the old Buddhist monks in the alliance swept in to hold back Shui Meng, who was on the verge of losing it, and plastered on a benign expression. Shui Gongji, pay heed to these words, he said in a sympathetic, coaxing tone. This old monk knows that you and Mo Ran share a deep personal grudge, but this assault on the palace is a critical operation. You must think of the group. Don't let your emotions carry you away. The individual whom everyone referred to as Shui Gongji was a youth named Shui Meng. Over a decade ago, he'd been praised by all as a young prodigy, the darling of the heavens. But circumstances changed with the times, and Shui Meng was no longer in his element. Now he was forced to suffer their taunts and ridicule. And also he could go up the mountain to meet Mo Ran face to face once more. Shui Meng's face twisted with anger, his lips trembling, but with great effort he suppressed his feelings and merely asked, Then just how long do you plan to wait around? We've got to at least survey the surroundings, right? That's right. What if Mo Ran has set traps? Shui Gongji, don't be impatient, the old monk who'd stepped in earlier added. We've come all this way to the foot of the mountain, so it would be best to remain wary. Either way, Mo Ran is trapped inside his palace and can't come down to us. He's at the end of his rope with nowhere to go. What use would it be for us to be impatient and act recklessly? There are so many of us down here, and so many illustrious and prominent figures in our company. If they were to lose their lives to rash judgment, who would be responsible? Responsible? Shi Mei burst with rage. Then let me ask you, who's going to be responsible for my Shizun's life? Mo Ran has had my Shizun imprisoned for 10 years. 10 whole years. With my Shizun right before my eyes, just up the mountain. How am I supposed to wait? Aha! Gotcha. On hearing Shi Mei mention his teacher, the mob couldn't help but feel a twinge of guilt. Some looked ashamed, and others averted their gazes, mumbling one excuse or another. 10 years ago, when Mo Ran gave himself the title Taishan Jun, he laid waste to the 72 cities of Rufeng sect, and planned to do the same to the remaining 9 great sects. Later still, when he crowned himself emperor, he was going to kill every last one of you. Who was it who stopped him both times? If it hadn't been for my Shizun, who put his own life on the line for you, would any of you be alive now? Would you even be standing here, spouting these empty words at me? At length, someone cleared their throat. Shui Gongxi, don't be angry, they said gently. With regards to Chu Zongxi? We all feel guilt as well as gratitude. But as you said, he's been imprisoned for 10 years. If anything was going to happen, it would have already... Well, you've waited for 10 years now. Waiting another moment won't hurt, wouldn't you say? Wouldn't I say? I'd say go fuck yourself. That someone gaped in shock. How dare you? Why wouldn't I dare? Shizun put his own life on the line, and it was all to save people like... Shi Mei couldn't continue the sentence. Instead, he choked out through a sob. All of you are undeserving. I'm kind of hyped for Shi Mei, I'm not gonna lie. His piece said... Shi Mei jerked away, turning his face aside. His shoulders shook lightly as he held back his tears. It's not like we said we weren't going to rescue new name, who this? Chu Zongxi. That'll click. It's not like we said we weren't going to rescue Chu Zongxi. Yeah, we all remember the things Chu Zongxi did for us. Of course we didn't forget. It's pure slander for Shui Gongxi to say such things, calling us ingrates. I won't stand for it. But come to think of it, wasn't Mo Ran also a disciple of Chu Zongxi? Someone asked quietly. I must say, when the disciple turns out to be a malefactor. Ooh, malefactor. Of course, that would be the opposite of benefactor. How have I never seen the word malefactor before? Fantastic word. It's only right for the teacher to take responsibility. As they say, to raise without teaching is the father's flaw, and to teach without discipline is the teacher's failing. Maybe it was inevitable. So what's there to complain about? Now this was definitely going too far, and it was immediately decried. What nonsense! Watch what you're saying! The same decrier then turned toward Shui Mei with a diplomatic look. Shui Gongxi, some patience. How can I be patient? Shui Mei cut him off, his gaze furious. Easy enough for all of you to stand around talking, but that's my Shizun. Mine. I haven't seen him in years. I don't even know whether he's alive or dead, much less how he's doing. Why do you think I'm even standing here? His breathing was harsh and ragged, and the corners of his eyes reddened as he continued. Don't tell me you're all waiting here. Woo! Trying to skip a page. Hoping for Mo Ran to come down the mountain of his own accord to kneel in front of you and beg for mercy. Shui Gongxi. Other than Shizun, I have no family left in this world. Shui Mei jerked his sleeve free from the old monk's hold. Fine, you won't go? He asked hoarsely. Then I'll go myself. After flinging out that last statement, he left to head up the mountain, a solitary figure with a single sword. The chilly, damp wind mingled with the susurration of the foliage. Ooh, susurration, another good word. I've heard of that one, but another good word. Combined with the thick fog that lay everywhere, it was as if countless malicious ghosts and aggrieved spirits wandered amidst the trees, rustling and whispering. All alone, Shi Mei climbed the peak toward Mo Ran's magnificent palace, which stood like a beacon in the night, illuminated by calm candlelight. As he drew near, his gaze caught on the 3 graves at the foot of the heaven-piercing tower. When he approached for a closer look, he saw that long weeds had grown over the first grave mound, and on its gravestone were inscribed the following words in a childish, dogged scrawl. Grave of the esteemed consort Chu. In contrast to this esteemed consort, the second grave was newly dug, the earth only just sealed, and upon the tombstone was inscribed, Grave of the Deep-Fried Empress Song. I get the feeling we'll learn what that means. Why did that one scene from Game of Thrones come to mind? You know, where that one asshole gets a crown? Shi Mei had no words. If this had been 10 or more years ago, such a ridiculous sight would have made him laugh out loud in spite of himself. At the time, he and Mo Ran had been disciples under the same Shizun, and Mo Ran had been quite the joker. Even though Shi Mei had found Mo Ran disagreeable, despite everything, the man had still ended up making him laugh from time to time. Heaven only knew what all this steamed consort and deep-fried empress business was about. Again, we'll find out. I'm sure we will. Perhaps the style with which Scholar Mo had graced his 2 wives was the same as that which had produced Wang Ba, Tortoise, Gua, Croak, and Jiba, Cease Battle. As to why he would bestow such monikers on his own empress and consort, there was no knowing. Shi Mei turned his gaze to the 3rd grave, which lay open under the night sky. Within it lay a coffin, but there was no body in that coffin, and the tombstone remained unmarked. However, before the grave sat a small pot of pear blossom white wine, a bowl of chili oil wontons long gone cold, and a few plates of spicy, numbing mala side dishes, all fare favored by Mo Ran. Shi Mei stared at the grave for a long moment as a shock struck his heart. Could it be that Mo Ran had no intention of fighting, and that he had long since dug his own grave, that he was ready to die? The thought made Shi Mei break into a cold sweat. He refused to believe it. Mo Ran was the kind of person who clung to things till his dying breath without ever showing fatigue, the kind of person who didn't know the definition of surrender. Given his history, he was bound to keep fighting the rebel army to the bitter end, so why? These past 10 years, Mo Ran had stood at the summit of power. What exactly had he seen? What exactly had happened to him? No one knew. That's a surprising amount of empathy for somebody who hates his guts, you know? That shows a certain degree of, I suppose, whatever the opposite of tunnel vision would be. For Shi Mei to think all of this, and not just be so that he doesn't even consider. I like this guy. Shi Mei turned around and re-entered the darkness, stalking in great strides towards the brightly lit Wushan Palace. Mo Ran sat within that palace, his eyes screwed shut and his face deathly pale. Shi Mei had guessed right. Mo Ran was determined to die. That grave mound outside had been dug by his own hands. 2 hours ago, he'd used a communication spell to dismiss his servants, then swallowed a deadly poison. With his high level of cultivation, the poison's efficacy had slowed to a crawl as it spread throughout his body, leaving him able to feel every single agonizing moment with vivid acuity as the effects of the poison dissolved his internal organs. Ow doesn't seem to cover it, really. The doors to the hall opened with a creak. Mo Ran didn't look up. He only rasped, Shi Mei, it's you, right? Have you come? Shi Mei stood alone upon the golden pavement of the hall, his ponytail swinging free, his light armor glinting. This was a reunion of disciples who had been in the same sect once upon a time. Yet Mo Ran's face was devoid of expression as he sat there with his chin propped in one hand, the thick curtains of his fine lashes lowered over his gaze. Everyone spoke of him as though he were a savage fiend with 3 heads and 6 arms, but in truth, he was exceptionally good-looking. The bridge of his nose curved delicately, and the color of his lips was pale and dewy. His natural features had a sweet, gentle cast. If one only looked at his face, they would think he was a good and lovely person. The sight of this face was all Shi Mei needed to confirm his suspicion. Mo Ran had poisoned himself. It was hard to parse his feelings at that moment, and when he opened his mouth to speak, no words came out. In the end, he clenched his fists and asked, "Where's Shizun?" "What?" "I said, where's Shizun?" Shi Mei demanded sharply a second time. "Yours, mine, our Shizun, where is he?" "Oh." Mo Ran snorted softly and finally, slowly blinked open his eyes. His pupils were dark, so black they looked to have hints of purple, and his gaze seemed to travel through layer upon layer of time since past emphasis syllable, and his gaze seemed to travel through layer upon layer of time since past before focusing on Shi Mei. "Come to think of it, it's been 2 years since the last time you and Shizun met face to face." I'm going to finish the sentence before we get to art. Since your farewell at Kunlun, new word, Teshui? Basically? Kunlun Teshui Palace? Mo Ran smiled faintly. Shui Meng, do you miss him? We have art. We have the very first art. And it is, I mean, it's 7 Seas. It's going to be beautiful art. But this is pretty beautiful art. I'm deeply excited as to, well, also kind of terrified, but deeply excited as to all of the art that we are about to witness for this series. Enough nonsense. Give him back to me. Mo Ran watched Shi Mei calmly as he bore through the twisting pain in his stomach. His lips curled into a sneer and he leaned against the back of his throne. Darkness encroached on his sight. It was as if he could feel his innards wrenching, melting, and disintegrating into stinking, bloody swill. I did not pronounce innards properly, but that's what we were talking about. Give him back to you, Mo Ran replied indolently. How foolish. Why don't you use your brain to think a little? Shizun and I share an intense hatred for each other. How could I allow him to live in this world? You! Shi Mei's face went white and his eyes widened as he stepped back involuntarily. You can't have. You wouldn't. I wouldn't what? Mo Ran laughed softly. Why don't you tell me? Why wouldn't I? Shi Mei's voice shook. But he's still your Shizun. After everything, how could you bear to kill him? He raised his head to look up at Mo Ran, seated on his emperor's throne. The heavens had Fuxi, hell had Yanluo, and in the mortal realm, there was Mo Yu. But as far as Shi Mei was concerned, even if Mo Ran had become the eminent emperor of the mortal realm, there was no way he could have done this. His body shook all over as his outraged tears spilled over. Mo Yu, are you even human anymore? Mo Ran lifted his gaze. He wants what? You know very well how he once treated you, Shi Mei said, tone taut with emotion. Mo Ran barked a sudden laugh. Are you trying to remind me that he once beat me so hard that I was left covered with cuts and bruises? That he made me kneel before all to confess my crimes? Or did you want to remind me that for your sake, for the sake of all these insignificant nobodies, he stood in my way at every turn, ruining my great endeavors time and again? Shi Mei shook his head, pained. This would be in Shi Mei's head. No, Mo Ran. Think about it. Let go of your vicious hatred and look back properly. He once trained you in cultivation and martial arts, trained you in the art of self-defense. He once taught you how to read and write, taught you poetry and painting. He once learned how to cook, just for you, even though he was so clumsy and got cuts all over his hands. He once waited every day for you to come home, all alone by himself, from nightfall till the break of dawn. These words caught in his throat, and at length Shi Mei could only choke out, His His temper is terrible and his words are harsh, but even I know how well he treated you. So how could you? Shui Meng raised his head, but having held back so many tears, his throat was even more constricted and he couldn't continue. After a long pause, Mo Ran's quiet sigh floated down from the throne. Yeah, but Shui Meng, did you know? Mo Ran was clearly exhausted. He also ended the life of the only person I ever loved. The only one. A deathly silence hung over them for a good long while. The pain in Mo Ran's stomach, as his blood and flesh tore and ripped themselves to shreds, was like a blazing fire. Still, we were once master and disciple. His body is resting in the Red Lotus Pavilion at the southern peak. He's been very well preserved and lies there among the lotus blossoms, looking like he's only fallen asleep. Mo Ran caught his breath and forced himself to calm down. When he spoke, his expression remained blank, but his fingers dug into the red sandalwood of his throne's armrest so tightly that his knuckles went white. His corpse is maintained by my spiritual powers. If you miss him, don't waste your breath here with me. Go now, before I die. A lump of astringent sweetness swarmed up into Mo Ran's throat. He coughed a couple times, and when he opened his mouth again, his lips and teeth were covered in blood, but his gaze was at ease. Go, he said with a rough voice. Go see him. Without my spiritual powers, he'll turn to dust. If you don't make it before I die, it'll be too late. Done speaking, he closed his eyes dispiritedly. The poison had reached his heart, bringing with it a torment like a raging inferno. The agony was so all-consuming that even Shui Meng's anguished, despairing wails felt like they came from far away, like he and Mo Ran were separated by an ocean spanning thousands of miles, and his voice traveled over those waters. Blood continued to drip from the corners of Mo Ran's lips, and his hands fisted in his sleeves as his muscles spasmed. When he opened his bleary eyes, Shui Meng had long since run off. The kid's Qigong lightness wasn't bad. It wouldn't take him long to reach the southern peak. He should be able to see Shizun one last time. Mo Ran pushed himself up, wobbling as he rose to his feet. Using hands flecked with blood, he formed a seal and sent himself to the base of Sishan Peak's heaven-piercing tower. It was deep autumn, and the Haitong blossoms were in full, abundant bloom. He didn't know why he'd ended up choosing this place to end his sinful life, but with all of the flowers blooming so vibrantly, at least it wouldn't be such a bad tomb. Mo Ran lay down in that open coffin and looked up to watch the blossoms of the night drift soundlessly as they wilted, drifting into the coffin, drifting onto his cheeks, dancing and fluttering, fading away like the events of the past. In this life, he'd started out as a bastard son who possessed nothing, and after enduring a great deal, he'd become Lord Emperor of the mortal realm. He had blasphemed, and his hands were covered with blood. All that he loved, all that he hated, all that he prayed for, all that he resented. When all was said and done, there was nothing left. Ultimately, he hadn't even bothered to pen an epitaph for himself with that wild and spirited scrawl of his. There was no shameless Emperor of the Ages, nor was there something ridiculous like deep-fried or steamed. He hadn't written a thing. The grave of the first Emperor of the cultivation world was, in the end, unmarked. And so the curtains finally closed on a spectacle that had lasted for a decade. Many, many hours later, the rebel army invaded the resident palace of the Emperor with torches held high. However, what awaited them was an empty Wushan palace, a Sishan peak without a soul, and at the Red Lotus Pavilion, Shui Meng, who had cried himself numb, slumped over on a floor covered in ashes. And finally, before the heaven-piercing tower, the long, cold corpse of Mo Wei-yu. That was the end of the chapter. Chapter 2 is called This Venerable One Lives. That was pretty banger of an opening chapter, I won't lie to you. That's pretty solid. That's pretty damn good. Like, I thought, and I don't know where I had heard that the opening chapter was really hard to get through. Maybe it was the opening chapter of a different volume that had recently come out, and I had just mistaken it for like volume 1 when they're actually talking about volume 4 or something. And so kind of reasonably, I was expecting like he was going to do, we were going to see him at his most merciless, and we were going to see him do like some shocking, awful thing or things, and we would get, you know, a firm establishment of like how awful he was and the type of absolute, you know, trigger warning madness that we were in for and all of that. And we kind of didn't get that. I mean, obviously they told us he's a tyrant and we got, you know, certain indications and everything. It's all set up very beautifully. But she didn't go the easy, really like attention grabbing route with this first chapter anyway. And I appreciate that because it was still compelling. But my impression is that she had the confidence to not splash it all out there on the first page or in this first chapter. Instead, holding it back a little bit to let everything unfurl, right? We'll get to it. We'll get to everything. You know the basic premise of the story. I don't have to have some super shocking opening in order to establish that. I respect it. All right. Chapter 2. My heart has stilled, and my thoughts turn to ash, yet unexpectedly the light of spring shines through the cold night. Could it be that the heavens pity the blade of grass in the secluded valley? Yet I fear that the world is unpredictable and full of only hardship. The warbling sound of a woman's clear voice wafted to his ears, the poetic verses cascading like pearls and jade, but all the sound did was make Mo Ran's head throb. The vein by his brow twitched madly. What's with all the noise? Where'd this wailing banshee even come from? Servants, kick this bitch off the mountain. Only after bellowing this did Mo Ran realize with a start that something wasn't right. Wasn't he supposed to be dead? Hatred, cold, pain, and loneliness coalesced as a stabbing sensation in his chest. Mo Ran's eyes flew open. Every memory of what had happened right before his death scattered like snow in the winds. He found himself lying on a bed. It wasn't his bed at Xishang Peak, but a bed carved with a dragon and phoenix, the wood heavily fragrant. The worn bedding was colored pink and purple and embroidered with mandarin ducks, the kind of bed only found in a whorehouse. Mo Ran froze. He knew where he was. This was the house of accommodation near Xishang Peak. This so-called house of accommodation just meant some brothel. Come for the fun, no strings attached. In his youth, Mo Ran had gone through a period of debauchery during which he spent his nights at this exact establishment more often than not. But this place had been sold and converted into a wine shop long ago, when he was in his 20s. How, after dying, had he ended up here of all places? Had he transgressed too terribly in life and wronged too many people, so much so that the king of the underworld had punished him by making him reincarnate as a prostitute to take customers? Why do I feel like he was kind of close? Like you were... The vibe is that feels so close, baby. It feels like you got almost there. Like he had transgressed too terribly in life and wronged too many people, so much so that the king of the underworld had punished him by making him reincarnate and live life over again. Potentially. Right? And not as a prostitute to take customers. Just live. Do it again. Try again. You went a little nuts the first time around. Maybe mulligan. Maybe do-over. I have no idea if that's true or not, but... While Mo Ran's imagination ran wild, he casually turned over in bed. Unexpectedly, he came face to face with a slumbering person. What the hell? Why was there a person next to him? A man at that, and a totally naked one to boot. The man had an androgynous appearance with gentle, lovely features that were pleasing to the eye. Mo Ran kept his expression blank, but his heart was full of turmoil. He stared at that pretty boy's slumbering face for a while before it hit him. Wasn't this the boy toy he doted on when he was young? Hadn't he been named Rong-san? Or was it Rong-ju? It didn't matter whether it had been San or Ju. What mattered was that this prostitute had caught a sexually transmitted disease and died so many years ago that by now even his bones had rotted away. Yet here he was, delicately curled by Mo Ran's side, neck and shoulders dotted all over the blue and purple love bites. Mo Ran grimaced, lifted the quilt, and took a peek downward. This Rong-ju, or San, or whatever, he just called him Rong-ju for now. This Rong-ju's pretty little body was covered in rope burns, and his pale, tender thighs were still intricately bound with red rope. Mo Ran stroked his chin. How interesting. Consider, this exquisite rope art, this skilled technique, this familiar scene, wasn't this his own fucking handiwork? You're getting there, bud. One step at a time. Being a cultivator, the concept of rebirth wasn't new to him, and he began to suspect that he had somehow gone back in time. To confirm his suspicions, Mo Ran went to find a copper mirror. The mirror was worn, but in good enough condition to vaguely make out his appearance within it. Mo Ran had been 32 when he died, but the face reflected in the mirror was rather young. It was a charming face that exuded a youthful audacity, and it looked no older than 15 or 16. There was no one else in the room. Thus, after much consideration, the once cruel ruler of the cultivation world, the despot of Sichuan, emperor of the mortal realm, and lord of Xishang Peak, Tixianjun, Mo Ran himself, expressed his honest thoughts. Fuck. The build-up to that punchline? At this, the sleeping Rong-ju was fucked awake. The pretty thing sat up languidly. I'm too excited. The pretty thing sat up languidly, thin quilt sliding off his shoulder to reveal an expanse of pale skin. He gathered his long, soft hair and, lifting his peach blossom eyes smudged with red ink, yawned. Oh, Mo Gangji, you're up early today. Mo Ran did not respond. Way back when, he had indeed liked Rong-ju's type, delicate and androgynous. But now the 32-year-old Tixianjun couldn't figure out what the hell he had been thinking when he found this kind of man attractive. Did you not sleep well last night? Nightmare? This venerable one fucking died. How's that for a nightmare? Rong-ju thought Mo Ran's continued silence was the symptom of a bad mood, so he slipped off the bed to stand before the carved window and wrapped his arms around Mo Ran from behind. Mo Gangji, pay attention to me, he said coyly. What are you spacing out for? Mo Ran's face turned blue at this embrace. He wanted nothing more than to rip this hussy off of himself and grant that fragile-looking face a couple dozen slaps, but he managed to suppress the urge. His head was still spinning with uncertainty about the whole situation. After all, if he really had been reborn, then he couldn't just beat up Rong-ju out of the blue after spending the previous day being all lovey-dovey with him. That would make it seem like he'd lost his marbles. Definitely out of the question. Mo Ran arranged his features to put on a pretense of forgetfulness. What day is it? Rong-ju blinked at him, then smiled. The 4th of May. 33rd year? That was last year. It's the 34th year now. They do say that great men tend to be forgetful. Mo Gangji is no exception. The 34th year. The gears in Mo Ran's head turned rapidly. This was the year he would turn 16, and in which he had been identified as the leader of Xishang Peak's long-lost nephew. Overnight, he had gone from being a pathetic, bullied dog to a phoenix on the branch. Then, had he really been reborn? Or was this just a hollow dream in death? Literally reborn to the time just before he encountered status and power. Okay. Rongzhu smiled. Mo Gongji is so hungry, he doesn't even remember the date. Wait here a moment, I'll go fetch some food. How do fried Yushuan pancakes sound? The newly reborn Mo Ran wasn't sure how to deal with all this yet, but he figured that things ought to be fine if he just followed the same approach as before. And so he thought back to his charismatic manner for those long-gone days and, suppressing his disgust, playfully pinched Rongzhu's thigh. Sounds delicious, he said. Bring a bowl of congee, too. And when you get back, I want you to feed me. Rongzhu pulled on some clothes and left, soon returning with a tray, atop which was balanced a bowl of pumpkin congee, 2 crispy Yushuan pancakes, and a plate of appetizers. Mo Ran happened to be a little hungry and was just about to dig into the pastries when Rongzhu brushed his hand away. Allow me to serve, Gongji. Rongzhu picked up a pancake and seated himself on Mo Ran's lap. He wore nothing but a thin robe, and his smooth-skinned thighs spread wide open as he sat flush against Mo Ran. He even rubbed against him now and then, his intentions self-evident. Mo Ran gazed at Rongzhu's face for a long moment. I don't think it was his intentions that were self-evident, you know what I mean? Euphemistic phrasing. What are you staring at me for? Rongzhu asked in mock displeasure, thinking he was getting horny again. The food's going to get cold. Mo Ran was silent for another moment, as he recalled the good deed Rongzhu had done him behind his back in his previous lifetime. The corners of his lips curved into a sweet smile. The great Tianjun had done plenty of gross things. There was nothing too gross for him so long as he felt like doing it. This right here would be just putting on a show, mere child's play. Mo Ran casually leaned back against the chair and smiled. Sit. I'm already sitting? You know very well where I'm telling you to sit. Rongzhu blushed and sputtered. Why the rush? Gongji, why not finish eating for... So, from what I gather, the general irony of... because the basic premise of this is Tyrant Emperor dies, goes back to being a teenager, and relives his life, and discovers certain things about his Shizun and his feelings for his Shizun. So, like, all of this, the irony of all of this is already so delightful. It's simply just very satisfying. Before Rongzhu could even finish his sentence, Mo Ran pulled him forward and pressed him back down. Rongzhu's hands shook and knocked the bowl of congee to the floor. Mo Gongji, he managed between gasps. The bowl! Leave it. But you should still eat first. Am I not eating right now? Mo Ran held his waist, the lovely visage of Rongzhu with his head flung back reflected in his pitch-black pupils. In Mo Ran's previous lifetime, he'd like to kiss those captivating red lips during these moments of intimacy. After all, Rongzhu was pretty and knew just the right words to say. It would have been a lie to say that Mo Ran had never felt anything for him. But now that Mo Ran knew what treacherous things those lips had done, he found them unbearably foul and had absolutely no interest in kissing them. The 32-year-old Mo Ran was different from the 15-year-old Mo Ran in many aspects. For example, the 15-year-old him still had known gentleness and love and intimacy. However, the 32-year-old him knew only violence. After Mo Ran was done, he looked at Rongzhu, passed out from getting fucked to within an inch of his life, with an undercurrent of something dark in his gaze. As he looked, his eyes curved faintly, carrying a hint of that sweet smile. He was incredibly good-looking when he smiled, his eyes a bold, rich black, with, from certain angles, a sheen of arrogant purple. Still smiling, he dragged Rongzhu onto the bed by his hair and casually picked up a shard of the broken bowl from the ground, which he held by Rongzhu's face. He'd always avenged every grievance done to him. This time would be no different. Maybe they meant chapter 2 was difficult to get through. As Mo Ran thought about how well he had taken care of Rongzhu in his last lifetime, how he'd even thought about buying Rongzhu's freedom, and how Rongzhu had repaid him by scheming against him with others, his eyes couldn't help but curve more deeply into a smile, and he pressed the shard against Rongzhu's cheek. This person's body was his livelihood. Without this face, he would have nothing. He would be forced to wander the streets like a dog, to crawl on the ground, be kicked, and suffer all kinds of spurning and abuse. Mo Ran was so delighted by this mere thought that even the disgust he felt from fucking Rongzhu vanished like smoke. His smile became even more lovely. His hand pressed down ever so slightly, and a thread of blood, captivatingly scarlet, seeped forth. The unconscious Rongzhu seemed to feel it and made a low, pained sound. With his tears clinging to his eyelashes, it made for quite a pitiful sight. Mo Ran's hand jerked to a stop. A dear friend had come to mind. Suddenly he realized what he had just been about to do. It was a few dazed moments before finally, slowly, he lowered his hand. He had done so much evil that it had become habitual. He'd even forgotten that he was now reborn. At this moment, all those things had yet to happen. Irrevocable mistakes had not yet been committed, and that person still lived. There was no need to walk the same cruel path. He could do it over. Mo Ran sat down, one foot propped on the bed, and absent-mindedly toyed with the piece of broken porcelain in his hand. Noticing a greasy pancake that still sat on the table, he grabbed it, peeled off the wax paper, and tore into it with his teeth, eating until crumbs flew everywhere and his lips grew shiny with grease. Yushuan pancakes were a specialty of this brothel. They weren't that good, kind of flavorless actually, especially compared to hello. I need to be able to turn one page at a time. And now what the heck was the first? Especially compared to the delicacies Mo Ran would taste in the future, but after this place went under, Mo Ran would never again get to eat one. However, in this moment, even after everything that had happened in the past, here he was, once more tasting this familiar flavor. The unreal feeling of having been reborn lessened with every swallow. By the time he finished the pancake, his mind was finally clear of the stupor it had been in ever since he woke. He really had been reborn. Everything hateful in his life, everything he couldn't take back, all of it, had not yet come to pass. He had not yet killed his uncle and aunt, not yet razed 72 cities to the ground, not yet betrayed his teacher and ancestors, not yet gotten married, not yet... No one had died yet. Mo Ran savored the taste in his mouth, licking along his teeth and feeling the thread of joy in his chest balloon rapidly into a feverish excitement. He'd rebuked heaven and earth in his last life, experimenting with all three of the forbidden techniques of the mortal realm. He had mastered 2 of these 3. Only the last, Rebirth, had eluded him, despite his natural aptitude. Oh, really? I think you might be underestimating yourself. I think you may have potentially mastered all 3. Unexpectedly, that which he had failed to obtain in life had, in death, fallen effortlessly into his lap. All the distaste, the revulsion, the desolation, the loneliness, all of his complicated feelings from his previous life remained locked in his chest. The sight of the army marching on Xishang Peak, the 10,000 fathoms of torch fire, was fresh in his mind. At that time, he really hadn't wanted to live anymore. Everyone had said that his very existence cursed all who came close to him, and that he was fated to die alone. Everyone had turned their backs on him. Toward the end, even Mo Ran himself had felt like the walking dead, apathetic and isolated. He didn't know what and where things had gone wrong. For an irredeemably wicked person like himself to get the chance to redo everything after ending his own life. Why destroy Rongzhu's face over such a measly grudge from so long ago? Rongzhu loved money. Mo Ran would just not pay him this time, and on top of that, he'd take some silver to teach him a lesson. As for Rongju's life, he didn't want that burden just yet. I'm letting you off easy, Rongju, Mo Ran said. Mo Ran said this with a smile and tossed the porcelain shard out the window. He then proceeded to clear out Rongju's jewels and valuables, tucking all of them into his pouch before unhurriedly getting dressed and tidying himself up. Finally, he leisurely strolled out of the establishment. Uncle, aunt, cousin Shuimeng, Shizun, and Mo Ran's eyes softened at the thought of one last person. Shige, I'm coming. Shige. Shiji is sister. Is Shige brother? Am I remembering that correctly? Older martial sibling. Thank you. Okay. Ooh. All right. That was the end of the chapter, by the way. Sorry. Whew. Okay. Hot damn. We're on page 39 for chapter 3, called This Venerable One's Shige. Do I need... No, I'm okay. Whew. Since Mo Ran's soul had been transported back in time, perhaps his cultivation had come along for the ride. Oh, that would be a thing. That would change a few things. Mo Ran recited an incantation and felt the spiritual energy in his body surge forth. Though abundant, it wasn't strong. That was to say, his cultivation had not carried over. That would have been huge. Holy shit. Although from a thematic perspective, of course he doesn't have it. Because that's part of the whole point. He's gone back to before he had great power in any sense. I see you, Meat Bun. No matter. He was smart, perceptive, and blessed with innate talent. He could just cultivate all over again, no big deal. Rebirth was already a blessed occurrence of unparalleled proportions. It stood to reason that there would be some small imperfections here and there. As Mo Ran thought this, he quickly rearranged his gloomy, fierce expression into one more appropriate for a 15-year-old youth, and cheerfully headed back toward his sect. It was the middle of summer. Horse-drawn carriages sped past, wheels rolling, and no one paid any attention to the 15-year-old Mo Ran. Only the occasional village woman, taking a break from tending the fields and looking up to wipe her sweat, noticed this exceptionally handsome youth and stared a bit. Mo Ran returned those stares with his own, smiling as he did so until those married women blushed bright red and looked away. Around evening, Mo Ran arrived at Wuchang Town. The town wasn't far from Xishang Peak, whose towering peaks loomed in the distance, framed by clouds lit afire by the blood-red setting sun. Damn. Feeling a little hungry, he headed into a restaurant. As he glanced at the menu and knocked on the counter, he placed a quick order. Shopkeeper, 1 bonbon chicken, a plate of spicy Fuchi Feipan beef tripe and chili sauce, 2 caddies of wine, and a plate of sliced beef, please. This establishment was a popular rest stop and was currently bustling with activity. A storyteller was on the stage, shaking his fan and telling the story of Xishan Peak in an animated manner, spit flying everywhere. Mo Ran picked a booth by a window and listened as he ate. As I'm sure everyone already knows, the cultivation world is divided into the upper and lower cultivation realms. Today we'll talk about the greatest sect in the lower cultivation realm, Xishang Peak. Did you know that 100 years ago, our Wuchang town was a poor and desolate place due to its proximity to the entrance of the ghost realm? No one dared go out after dark. If they really needed to travel at night, they had to ring an exorcism bell and sprinkle incense ash and paper money while chanting, "People barred by mountains, demons barred by paper," and pass along as quickly as they could. But these days, our town thrives and flourishes, no different from anywhere else, and it's all thanks to Sishon Peak's care. This righteous sect stands right at the gate to the Ghost Realm, between the boundary of yin and yang, even though the sect was established not that long ago. That's an important detail, I imagine. See, we're just here and then the underworld's there? Okay. That might be relevant, I guess. Whew. Mo Ran had heard this history so many times that his ears had damn near grown calluses, and so he started glancing around outside the window instead. It just so happened that at that moment, a stall had been set up below the window. There, several strangers from out of town were dressed in cultivator garb and carrying a cage covered with a black cloth as they performed street-side tricks. This was much more interesting than the storyteller's tale, and Mo Ran's attention was drawn to it. Come one, come all, take a look at these Pishu cubs, fierce mythical beasts we tamed to obediently perform tricks and even do math. It's not easily traveling to perform chivalrous deeds. Everyone spares some tips and stick around. Come watch the first trick, Pishu Abacus. With a flourish, the cultivators ripped away the black cloth to reveal a couple of human-faced, bare-bodied monsters in the cage. Mo Ran was speechless. Just a couple of meek, fuzzy bear cubs? And you actually dare to claim that they're Pishu? That was quite some bullshit right there. Only donkey brains would believe it. But Mo Ran's worldview was soon widened as some 20 or 30 donkey brains gathered to watch, cheering and clapping. They drew the attention of everyone in the restaurant as well, making things quite awkward for the storyteller. The current leader of Sishon Peak is a man known far and wide for his strength and brilliance. Nice! Again! Encouraged, the storyteller glanced toward the owner of the voice, only to find a customer whose face glowed red with excitement, but whose gaze was locked not on himself, but on the street performers. Oh, the Pishu is doing math on an abacus? Wow, quite impressive. Good show. Make the Pishu juggle apples again. The entire restaurant was laughing as everyone gathered by the windows to watch the scene below. The storyteller pathetically tried to carry on. The master is best known for that fan of his. That light-color Pishu wants to eat the apple. Look at it rolling around on the ground. The storyteller wiped his face with a towel, his lips quivering with anger. Mo Ran pursed his lips in a smile and leisurely called out from behind the bead curtain, Forget Sishon Peak. Tell a story from the 18 Caresses instead. I guarantee it'll pull back everyone's attention. The storyteller didn't know that the person behind the curtain was one of the young masters of Sishon Peak himself, Mo Ran. He gathered all the moral integrity he had to stutter out, Vulgar stories are not fit for an elegant hall. Mo Ran laughed. You're calling this place an elegant hall? How are you not embarrassed? A burst of noise came from below. Oh, what a fast horse! Must be a cultivator from Sishon Peak. In the midst of the chatter, a black horse galloped from the direction of Sishon Peak and, in a flash, charged into the street-side circus. There were two people on the horse. One wore a black bamboo hat and was shrouded in a black cloak that covered them so completely it was impossible to tell their age or gender. The other was a 33 or 40-year-old woman. Was a 30 or 40, I don't know where I just got 33 from. The other was a 30 or 40-year-old woman with rough hands and a weathered face. The woman started crying as soon as she saw the man-bears. She scrambled off the horse and stumbled toward them, kneeling to embrace one of them in her arms as she wailed, My son! Oh, my son! The audience was stumped. Huh? Aren't these Pishu cubs? Someone muttered while scratching his head. Why is this woman calling it her son? Maybe it's a Pishu mother? Oh, that'd be quite something then, if the females can even take on human form. These villagers had no relevant knowledge or experience and were only babbling nonsense, but Mo Ran instantly figured out what was going on. Rumor had it that some rogue cultivators liked to abduct children, rip their tongues out so they couldn't talk, burn their skin off with boiling water, and then stick animal hides on their bloodied bodies so that once the blood had congealed, child and fur would become one, making them look just like a monster. These children couldn't speak or write and had no choice but to suffer abuse and obediently perform tricks like Pishu Abacus. Any resistance only earned them a beating. This reminds me of a horror movie that I can't name because it's spoilers. But if you're into horror films, I guarantee you've heard of this one. It's from recent years. As in like the past, I don't know, 5-ish maybe? If you know, you know. Is what I'm saying. Took me right back there. No wonder he hadn't sensed any demonic energy. These Pishu weren't monsters at all, but actual living humans. While Mo Ran was thinking to himself, the person in the black cloak said something in low tones to the cultivators, who flew into a rage. Apologize? That ain't in my vocabulary. So what if you're from Xingqiu Peak? Mind your own damn business. Beat him up. They pounced on the black-cloaked person for a thrashing. Ayo! As Mo Ran watched his fellow disciple get beat up, he only let out a low chuckle. How scary. He had zero intentions of helping out. Even in his previous life, he'd always loathed the righteous and meddlesome ways of his sect. The lot of them rushed to throw themselves at any trouble that cropped up like so many idiots. They wouldn't even bother with some minor inconvenience like Mr. Wang's cat getting stuck in a tree. Every single last member of the entire sect, from the leader all the way down to the servants, was a dimwit. There were countless injustices in the world, so what was the point of caring? It was enough to exhaust a person to death. Ah, that's one of his problems. Got it. Got it. They're fighting! They're fighting! Oh, what a punch! Within and without the restaurant, everyone gathered to spectate. So many of you ganging up on one person, aren't you ashamed? Watch out behind you, sir. Ah, close call. What? Nice dodge. These people loved a good fight, but Mo Ran didn't care to watch. He'd seen plenty of bloodshed. To him, the events currently unfolding were like unto a fly's buzzing. He lazily dusted peanut crumbs off his clothes and got up to leave. Downstairs, the cultivators and the black-cloaked person had reached a stalemate, swords swishing. Crossing his arms, Mo Ran leaned against the restaurant's door. All it took was one glance to make him click his tongue in annoyance. What a disgrace. Everyone from Xingqiu Peak was a fierce fighter, each the equal of 10 men, but the black-cloaked person was a pathetic combatant. Even when they were dragged off the horse, surrounded, and kicked, they held back. Instead, this person cried out politely, "Honorable men speak with their mouths, not their fists. I'm trying to reason with you. Why won't you listen?" The cultivators were as speechless as Mo Ran. The cultivators were thinking, the hell? This person's already been so soundly whipped and they're still preaching that nonsense? Is this what they call manteau for brains? All empty inside? But Mo Ran's face changed abruptly as, for a second, his head spun. He held his breath, eyes wide with disbelief. That voice. Shi Mei! Mo Ran shouted and rushed forward, agitated. He let loose an attack filled with spiritual power that instantly knocked away 5 of the Jianghu cultivators' swindlers and knelt on the ground to help up the black-cloaked figure, who was covered in muddy boot marks. His voice couldn't help but tremble slightly as he said, "Shi Mei, is that you?" Okay. Okay. That was the end of the chapter, by the way. We're on page 47 for chapter 4, called This Venerable One's Cousin. Let me double check real quick. These chapters haven't been too terribly long, but since we're getting into the last half hour-ish here, I just kind of want to see. Okay, yeah. We should be able to get through this chapter. This Shi Mei was not that kind of Shi Mei. Footnote. Shi Mei meaning a younger martial sister. Shi Mei was in fact male, and moreover, considering when he joined the sect, he was technically Mo Ran Shixiang. The reason he had such an unfortunate name was the leader of Xingqiu Peak's lack of erudition. Shi Mei was an orphan, and the sect leader had found him in the wild. The boy had been a weak and sickly child, and so the sect leader had thought to give him a humble name, as humble names bring an easier life. The child had been astonishingly pretty, like a darling little girl, lovable and charming. After much thought, the leader had eventually come up with the name Shueya, a simple given name that just meant little girl. Hello? It could be a coincidence, but so far we only know one person with the Shui name. As Shueya grew older and older, so too had he grown more and more beautiful. He possessed a slim figure, and the tips of his brows and the corners of his eyes were well shaped, lending him a graceful... Oh, I think this is mine. I don't think it's mean. M-I-E-N? I should probably look that up. The overall effect was that of a striking and peerless natural beauty. The crude, uncultured farmers of the villages wouldn't think it wrong to use a name like Shueya, but had anyone ever heard of a legendary beauty whose name was a homonym for dog paws or steelcock? No, I don't think we had. The boy's fellow sect disciples hadn't thought it appropriate and gradually stopped calling him Shueya. But since it had been a name bestowed by the sect leader, they hadn't dared presume to change it, and so they'd half-jokingly started calling him Shi Mei instead. It was Shi Mei this, Shi Mei that, until at last the sect leader shook out his long sleeves and kindly suggested, Shueya, why don't you change your name to Shi Mei once and for all? What do you think of using the character Mei from the word Meng Mei? We're getting closer, that's a Meng. Meng Mei has a footnote. Meng Mei meaning ignorant, oblivious, or concealed. He'd actually had the gall to ask. What normal person wouldn't abhor such a name? Nevertheless, Shi Mei was sweet-tempered by nature, and when he saw the sect leader watching him with excited cheerfulness, clearly thinking that he'd done him an amazing service, Shi Mei didn't have the heart to decline. Even if he felt aggrieved, he couldn't embarrass the sect leader, so he knelt and accepted the name with grace. From that day on, his name became Shi Mei. The figure in the black cloak coughed a few times before finally catching his breath. His gaze fell on Mo Ran. Aran, what are you doing here? Behind a thin layer of organza, a pair of eyes, gentle as spring water and bright as the night stars, pierced the depths of Mo Ran's heart. With this one look, the seal on Taishanjun's long-buried boyhood feelings and tender affections was broken. This was Shi Mei. There could be no mistake. Mo Ran was a scoundrel. In his past life, he'd played around with many men and women. That he hadn't died from too much sex had come as a surprise even to him, but the only person he'd ever given his heart to was one he'd never dared to touch. Oh. Okay. All right, Shi Mei. Hello, how do you... we were right there. He and Shi Mei had been close, and there had been a faint hint of... once again, too excited. There had been a faint hint of romance in their relationship. However, up until Shi Mei's death, Mo Ran had only ever held his hand, and the one time their lips had brushed in a kiss, it had been an accident. Mo Ran felt that he was dirty and sullied, while Shi Mei was pure and sweet. In other words, Mo Ran wasn't fit to be with him. In life, Mo Ran had treasured and cherished Shi Mei, and he had done so all the more after Shi Mei's death. In death, Shi Mei had become Taishanjun's unattainable white moonlight. But no matter how desperately Taishanjun had tried to cling to his memories of Shi Mei, the deceased belonged to the past, returned irretrievably to the earth with not a trace left behind. But in this moment, Shi Mei stood in front of him, once more living and breathing. It was only with great effort and all of Mo Ran's willpower that he held back his emotions and restrained himself. Mo Ran helped Shi Mei up and patted away the dust on his cloak, heart aching with an almost physical pain. If I hadn't been here, they would have bullied you even more. Why didn't you hit back? I wanted to try reasoning with him first. You can't reason with these people. Are you injured? Where does it hurt? Shi Mei coughed. Haran, I'm fine. Mo Ran turned to the cultivator's expression ferocious. You dare lay hands on someone from Xisheng Peak? Some nerve you've got there. Ron, let it go. Didn't you guys want to fight? Come on then, fight me. The group of cultivators had taken only a single blow from Mo Ran, but that one blow had made them sufficiently aware that his cultivation skills were far beyond theirs. They only knew how to pick on those weaker than themselves, and so they retreated, afraid to brawl with him. Shi Mei sighed. Ron, cease this quarreling. It's best to forgive and forget. I don't think he's done either of those things, ever. Mo Ran turned back to Shi Mei and couldn't help but feel a forlorn sort of distress in his heart as the corners of his eyes got all hot. Shi Mei had always been kind-hearted. He'd held no resentment, no hatred, not even in his last moments. He'd even tried to persuade Mo Ran to not hate their Shizun, who could clearly... I'm sorry, I'm glitching out. I just thought one thing, but I don't think that's right. He'd even tried to persuade Mo Ran to not hate their Shizun, who could clearly have saved Shi Mei's life, but who had instead chosen to stand there and do nothing. But I'm okay, though. See? Nothing happened. Having fewer problems is better than having more. Please, listen to this, Shige. Mo Ran sighed. All right, I'll listen to you. I'll listen to everything you say. He shook his head, then shot a glare at the cultivators. You hear that? My Shige has pleaded for leniency on your behalf. Hurry up and get lost. What are you still here for? Are you waiting for me to escort you away? Yes, we're leaving. Hang on, Shi Mei said to the group. The cultivators assumed that Shi Mei wasn't about to let them go, given that prior thrashing. Thus, they knelt on the ground and bowed. Shenchun, we were in the wrong. We were ignorant. Please let us go. You didn't listen to me earlier when I tried to reason with you, Shi Mei let out a sigh. You kidnapped someone's child and broke their parents' hearts. How can you live with this on your conscience? We're sorry, Shenchun. We made a mistake. We will never do it again. From now on, you must live honest lives. No more evil deeds, do you understand? Of course, you've taught us a great lesson. We've learned our lesson. We've learned our lesson. If that's the case, then please apologize to this madam and make sure her children get the treatment they need. With the incident thus concluded, Mo Ran helped Shi Mei onto his horse, then rented another one from a stable. The pair headed back to their sect, riding side by side. Given what they have done to these children, I don't think, a short, stern talking to and a promise never to do it again is really quite going to cut it, but that might be me. The moon shone high in the sky, its light piercing through the leaves to scatter onto the footpath. As they went, a euphoria began to grow within Mo Ran. He'd initially thought he wouldn't be able to see Shi Mei until he was back at Xishang Peak. He hadn't expected Shi Mei to come down the mountain to right this wrong and run into him by chance. This only cemented Mo Ran's belief that he and Shi Mei really were meant to be. Even though he and Shi Mei weren't technically an item at present, they'd already kissed in their past life. All signs indicated that it was going to be smooth sailing in this lifetime as well. It was all just a matter of time. The only thing he needed to worry about was protecting Shi Mei. He would make sure that things didn't happen like they had back then, when Shi Mei died in Mo Ran's arms. I smell trauma. Shi Mei, who had no way to know Mo Ran had been reborn, chatted with him as he usually did while they returned. Soon they arrived at the foot of Xishang Peak. Who would have thought that, in the dead of the night, a person would be standing in front of the mountain's gate, glaring at them with a thunderous gaze? Mo Ran, you finally remembered to come back? Huh? Mo Ran looked up. Oh, such an angry little darling of the heavens. It was none other than a youthful Shui Meng. Compared to the one Mo Ran had seen before his death, this 15 or 16-year-old version was much more haughtily dashing. He was dressed in a set of light armor with a black base and blue trim, his high ponytail tied with a silver hairpiece. A belt decorated with a lion's head was fastened around his strong, slender waist, and gaiters were wrapped about his wrists and ankles. The slim scimitar on his back gleamed with a cold light, and the quiver by his left arm glittered silver. Mo Ran sighed to himself, rendering judgment in his head. Flashy. Shui Meng, whether a teen or a grown-up, really was just flashy. Just look at him. Instead of sleeping, he was dressed in full armor. Whatever for? Was he here to spread his tail feathers for a peacock mating ritual? Mo Ran was an illegitimate child. When he was little, he hadn't even known who his father was. He'd gotten by working odd jobs at a pleasure house in Shangtan. Only when he was 14 had he been found by his relatives and brought to Xisheng Peak. Shui Meng, on the other hand, was the young master of Xisheng Peak, as well as Mo Ran's younger cousin. Shui Meng had been a prodigy from a young age, hailed by everyone as the darling of the heavens, son of the phoenix. An average cultivator spent their first 3 years learning cultivation basics and took at least 10 years to form a spiritual core. With Shui Meng's innate talent, it had taken him only 5 years to achieve all that. What, like it's hard? The accomplishment had delighted his parents to no end and garnered him much praise from everyone else. But in Mo Ran's eyes, whether you were talking about a phoenix or a chicken, a peacock or a duck, in the end they were all birds. The only difference lay in the length of their feathers. Thus, Mo Ran thought of Shui Meng as a squawking bird, while Shui Meng thought of Mo Ran as a dumb mutt. Is everybody gonna be animal-coded in this? Which I'm totally down for, by the way. Is everybody gonna be? Have we found out? I didn't even notice if there was an allusion to Shi Mei. I hadn't picked up on it yet, but now I'm like aware. Perhaps it ran in the family, but Mo Ran was shockingly gifted as well, even more so than Shui Meng. When Mo Ran first arrived, Shui Meng had considered himself superior by far. He was more refined, better educated, better at martial arts, and more handsome, nothing like his illiterate, half-assed hooligan of a cousin. Thus, this narcissistic little phoenix ordered his attendants. Listen up, this Mo Ran is an incompetent slacker, a total freeloader off the streets. You're not allowed to pay him any attention. Just pretend he's a dog. The attendants toadied right up to him, saying, Young master is right. That Mo Ran is already 14 years old. If he starts cultivating now, it'll take him 10 years to grasp the basics, 20 to form his spiritual core. By then, the young master will have ascended, and he'll just have to watch from the ground. Shui Meng sneered, quite pleased. 20? I doubt that useless piece of trash will be able to form a spiritual core at all, even if he spends his whole life trying. Nobody could have predicted that this useless piece of trash would gain his spiritual core after a single, effortless year of studying with his Shizun. What? Like it's hard? The little phoenix felt like he'd been struck by lightning. Such a harsh truth was hard to swallow, and so he'd stuck needles into a voodoo doll of Mo Ran, secretly cursing the other to slip and fall when traveling by sword and to trip over his words when reciting incantations. Every time he saw Mo Ran, the little phoenix, Shui Meng, made sure to roll his eyes and humph loud enough to be heard 3 miles away. As Mo Ran recalled these childhood memories, he couldn't help but narrow his eyes in amusement. It had been so long since he'd been able to enjoy such trivial things. After 10 years of loneliness, even past unpleasantness was delightful to him. Noticing Shui Meng, Shi Mei dismounted his horse and took off his black veiled bamboo hat to reveal his peerlessly stunning face. It really made sense that he dressed that way when he went out by himself. Just one sideways peek and Mo Ran could already feel elation and desire coursing through him. This person was simply too alluring, possessed of a beauty that was out of this world. Young master, Shi Mei greeted Shui Meng. Shui Meng nodded. You back? Did you take care of the man-bear incident? Shi Mei smiled. It's been taken care of, all thanks to Ran's help. Shui Meng's proud and lofty gaze, sharp as a blade, swept over to Mo Ran before flicking away. He furrowed his brow, face twisting in disdain, as if looking at Mo Ran for even another moment would sully his eyes. Shi Mei, go back and rest. Stop associating with him. He's a ruffian with bad habits. You'll only learn awful things hanging around him. Well, he probably wasn't wrong the first time. Mo Ran didn't take this lying down. If Shi Mei shouldn't learn from me, then is he supposed to learn from you? He asked mockingly. Dressed in full armor in the middle of the night, strutting about with your tail feathers all fanned out like a bird. Darling of the heavens? More like princess of the heavens. Shi Mei flew into a rage. Watch your mouth, Mo Ran. This is my home. Who do you think you are? Mo Ran contemplated this for a moment, counting off on his fingers as he did so. I'm your older cousin. If you think about it, I'm higher ranked than you, actually. It was like Shi Mei had been splattered with a face full of dog shit. He scowled disdainfully. Who wants a cousin like you? He snapped. Don't flatter yourself. In my eyes, you're nothing but a dog rolling in the mud. Shi Mei was someone who really liked to call other people dogs. Whelp, mutt, son of a bitch, raised by dogs. Such insults came to him with ease. Mo Ran picked his ear nonchalantly. He'd long since grown used to these things. But next to them, Shi Mei was feeling rather awkward. He said some soothing words in a low voice, and with a sneer, Shi Mei finally shut that eminent beak of his. Shi Mei smiled. Young master, it's so late, he said gently. Are you waiting for someone? What else would I be doing? Moon viewing? Mo Ran burst out laughing. No wonder you're all dressed up. You're waiting for a date. Ha, who's the unlucky one? I pity her. Shi Mei's expression grew so dark that it could have passed for charcoal. You, he snapped. Me? I'm waiting for you. What now, huh? Mo Ran was shocked, silent. That was the end of that chapter. We're on page 56. Real quick, let me see, because books never frickin' start on page 1. Not literally. I don't think. What did we start on? 12. Okay, so then that means it was 11. And we're at 56. We're at 45 pages? See if we can make it to a good 50. Hang on. Hang on. Hang on. Oh, is this going to be the long one? Oh. No, it's 10 pages. Can I do 10 pages in about 15 minutes? Who knows? Let's find out. Let's see. Oh, right. No, technically 9 pages. All right. Chapter 5 on page 57 is... This venerable one isn't a thief. Loyalty Hall was brightly lit. Shi Mei had taken his leave of them a while back, and so it was just Mo Ran and Shi Mei. Mo Ran followed Shi Mei down into the hall, and upon seeing the scene within, his confusion immediately cleared. So it was Rongju, that pansy. He'd actually had the nerve to come to Xishang Peak to complain about the money Mo Ran had stolen from him. Rongju was currently sobbing into the embrace of a big, burly man, the picture of a weeping beauty. At Mo Ran and Shi Mei's entrance, his sobs grew 3 pitches higher, as if he might foam at the mouth and swoon if not for the man's arms around him. A dainty lady sat on the hall's dais behind a bead curtain, clearly at a complete loss. Mo Ran didn't spare the repulsive pair so much as a glance as he instead greeted her. Aunt, I'm back. Ooh! The aunt. Aunt. I always say aunt. Why am I saying aunt now? Yeah, I don't know, actually. This woman was the lady of Xishang Peak, Madame Wang. Unlike those heroines who were every bit a match for their male counterparts, she was a meek homemaker who didn't dabble in matters outside the sect. She had absolutely no idea how to deal with this without her husband around. Ah, Ran, she said timidly, you finally returned. Mo Ran only smiled at her, acting as if the complainant duo weren't even there. It's so late, yet you're still up, Aunt. Did you need me for something? Aunt again. I've never said it that way in my life. You see, this Rongongji says that you took his money? Madame Wang had a rather thin face and was thus too embarrassed to say that Mo Ran had gone whoring. Instead, she chose to address the minor offense. Mo Ran's eyes curved as he smiled. Really? It's not like I'm short on money. Why would I need to take theirs? Besides, I don't recognize either of these people. Do I know you guys? The burly man sneered. Yours truly is surnamed Cheng, and I'm the eldest son of my family. As a businessman, minor formalities matter little to me. You may call me Cheng Da. Ah, so it's Da Changongji. That's a footnote. Da Cheng is a homonym for big intestine. I'm assuming as in large intestine. Mo Ran said as he smiled, having purposefully flipped his name around. It's an honor to finally meet you. Please excuse my rudeness. And this other gentleman is... Big intestine Gongji scoffed. Mo Gongji sure is fond of acting the fool. This may be our first meeting, but in the last month you've spent half your nights in Juer's bed. And you claim not to recognize him? Have you gone blind? Mo Ran was entirely unperturbed, and he continued to smile as he glanced at Rongju. What's this? Are you trying to slander me? I'm a decent, honorable person. Of course I've never slept with some Saner or Juer. Rongju's face was red with anger, but he continued to nestle against Cheng Da's chest, sobbing. Mo Gongji, I know my status is low and unseemly. If you hadn't exploited me so cruelly, I wouldn't have come calling. But to be treated in such a way, I really, truly do not know you, Mo Ran said in a tone as if he were the one who'd been wronged. I can't even tell if you're male or female. How could we have met before? You patronized my business just last night. How could you be so cold? Changongji, you have to get justice on my behalf. Rongju burrowed even deeper into Chengda's arms as his crying ratcheted up a notch. Off to the side, Shuemeng's entire face was ashen, his frown twitching as he listened to this absurdity. If not for the self-restraint of his upbringing as a young master, he would have kicked this repulsive pair off the mountain long ago. Big intestine Gongji, I love that we keep referring to him that way, stroked Rongju's hair and soothed him with some murmured words before raising his head. Madame Wang, Xisheng Peak is a virtuous, upright sect, but this Mo Gongji is vulgar and despicable, he declared threateningly. Juer works hard for his money. Gonna have that song stuck in my head for the rest of the stream. All to buy his own freedom as soon as possible. But this cretin, as if mistreating Juer weren't enough, he even stole Juer's hard-earned savings. The Cheng family are not cultivators, but we are wealthy, and we've been traders for generations. If your sect doesn't satisfactorily account for itself today, you'll find yourselves facing no end of trouble in Sichuan. Madame Wang was flustered. Chang'anchi, please calm down. Mo Ran sneered to himself. The Chang family were salt merchants and ludicrously loaded. Who would believe that the eldest son of that family couldn't afford to buy Rongju's freedom? That he would let his Juer earn his way himself? This smelled fishy, to say the least. Outwardly, however, his smile remained fixed. So Big Intestine Bro is the son of Yijo's affluent merchant family. Woo! I need water. Well, tea, but hang on. Oh my god, I look away for half a second. Outwardly, however, his smile remained fixed. So Big Intestine Bro is the son of Yijo's affluent merchant family. You're impressive and commanding, as expected. How admirable. How very admirable. Big Intestine Gongji looked quite smug. So you do know your place after all. Why don't you make this easy on yourself and fess up, then? Where are Juer's things? Hurry up and return them. I'm curious, though, Mo Ran said, still smiling. Your Juer has so many guests every day. Even if he did lose something, why am I being blamed? That's actually a good question. Never mind that he actually did it, but that is actually a good question. You, Big Intestine Gongji gritted his teeth, sneering. Fine. I just knew you would try to wriggle out of this. Madame Wang, as you've just seen, Mo Gongji refused to be reasonable and come clean. I'm not going to waste my breath on him anymore. You're the one in charge. You decide. Madame Wang knew little of such affairs, and her words stumbled over each other in her nervousness. Unwilling to let his mother be put on the spot, Shui Meng stepped forward. Changongji, Xishang Peak has strict disciplinary rules. If your accusations turn out to be true, if Mo Ran indeed violated our rules against greed and promiscuity, we will naturally mete out severe punishment. However, it's your word against his. Have you any evidence? Big Intestine Gongji smirked. I just knew your sect would pull this. That's why we rushed to get here before Mo Ran arrived in order to confront Madame Wang. He cleared his throat. All of you, listen well. Juer lost 2 units of pearls, 10 gold ingots, a pair of gold plum blossom bracelets, a pair of jade hairpins, and a jade butterfly pendant. Search Mo Ran for these items and the truth of my accusations will be made clear. What right do you have to search my body? Mo Ran objected. Sounds like a guilty conscience to me. Big Intestine Gongji lifted his chin pompously. Madame Wang, what are Xishang Peak's punishments? What are Xishang Peak's punishments for the crimes of theft and lechery? My husband has always been the one in charge of sect matters, Madame Wang answered quietly. I genuinely do not know. Dubious. How dubious. I think Madame Wang is purposely playing dumb to shield her nephew. Who would have thought that Xishang Peak was actually such a corrupt, filthy place? That's quite enough out of you. My aunt already told you she's not used to making these kinds of decisions. Are you quite done bullying a woman? Mo Ran cut in, finally fed up with this blathering. Even the carefree grin that usually graced his face had somewhat faded. He shot a sidelong glare at the nauseating couple. Fine, search me then, but what happens if you find nothing and all this turns out to be slander against my sect? Then I will promptly apologize to Mo Gongji. Sure, Mo Ran agreed, easily enough. Just one thing. If you're wrong, then as an apology, you have to crawl off Xishang Peak on your hands and knees. Where did he dump these things? Because obviously he doesn't have them on them. And frankly, the guy dealing with him, you know, Big Intestine Bro over here, should be picking up on this. He's pretty bold-faced, like, oh, okay. So if I'm, like, cleared of this, what are you gonna... Like, his behavior is, you know, kind of screaming confidence at the moment. Just walking in and being like, I don't know, y'all. Like, you should pick up on something. And if it all hinges on the items being on his person, maybe we clue in to the possibility that they're not there. Unless, of course, Mo Ran is just an incredible bluffer, which is an entirely possible concept. And he does have the things on him, and he's playing this, like, long game to come back around to not being searched in the first place. But, like, that would be my concern if I was accusing this guy. And he was like, oh, okay. Search me. And hey, let's put it, you know, if you lose, you have to do this. But I'm just saying. All intestine, no brain. I glanced at the chat. That's hilarious. Oh, geez. No, I went off on a whole side thing. Where the hell? Ah, we're over here. Mo Ran's confidence made a seed of doubt. Thank you. Did I just say this 2 seconds before it became relevant? Mo Ran's confidence made a seed of doubt take root within Big Intestine Gongji's heart. He'd grown up holding cultivators in high regard, though he himself, unfortunately, had no talent for cultivation. A few days ago, on learning that his old paramour Rongju had somehow earned Mo Ran's favor, he'd made a bargain with him. Rongju would find an opening to steal Mo Ran's cultivation progress, and in exchange, Big Intestine Gongji would buy his freedom. Ooh! Not only that, he'd promised to take Rongju into his household and to take care of him for life. Ooh! Big Intestine Gongji longed for cultivation, and Rongju coveted riches. The pair of scoundrels were well matched in their collusion. In Mo Ran's previous life, he had fallen for their scheme. He'd gotten even with them in the end, but not before suffering quite a bit. This time around, their ploy had entirely failed to bear fruit. For Mo Ran had done a sudden about-face, and for no apparent reason, either. Mere days ago, he'd still been in a drunken stupor, nestled tenderly in Rongju's arms and going, Juer this and Juer that, but this morning he'd brutally fucked Rongju twice, unexpectedly taken all his belongings and valuables, and run off. Big intestine Gongji was naturally furious and had dragged Rongju to Xishang Peak to complain. This salt merchant Gongji was a shrewd businessman. He figured that if he busted Mo Ran, then he could force Madame Wang to disperse Mo Ran's cultivation. He'd come prepared with a cultivation-absorbing jade pendant to gather some easy pickings, which he would later on assimilate into his own spiritual reservoir. But as he looked at Mo Ran now, Big intestine Gongji hesitated. Mo Ran was a crafty fellow. What if he'd already sold the stolen goods and was just waiting to pull one over on him? Then again, things had come to this point, and it would be a waste to give up at this point. Maybe Mo Ran was just bluffing. While he stewed in his thoughts, Mo Ran had gone ahead and started stripping. He took off his outer robe, casually tossed it aside, and gestured an invitation, smiling. Go ahead and search me. Take your time. After all that racket, in the end, they found nothing but some spare change. Big intestine Gongji's expression entirely transformed. Impossible! You're definitely pulling some kind of trick. Mo Ran narrowed his dark, purple-tinged eyes and stroked his chin. You've turned my robe inside out 10 times, and you've touched me all over a ton as well. There's nothing left to do short of getting me totally naked, and you're still not giving up? Mo Ran had a sudden realization. Oh, I get it. Big intestine Gongji, could it be that you've been lusting after my good looks and put on this whole show just to take advantage of me and cop a feel? Big intestine Gongji was so enraged that he was nearly about to pass out. His whole face was red with anger, and while he pointed at Mo Ran, he was unable to manage a single word. Shui Meng, watching from the side, had long since hit the limit of his patience. He might have disapproved of Mo Ran, but Mo Ran was a member of Xishang Peak, and outsiders had no right to degrade him. Shui Meng strode forward with not a trace of politeness, raised his hand, and unhesitatingly broke Big intestine Gongji's finger. We've humored you for half the night, he admonished him, but it turns out you were just making trouble out of nothing. Big intestine Gongji howled in pain and cradled his finger. All of you, you're in on it together. No wonder nothing was on Mo Ran. You must have hidden it all. You strip too. Let me search you. Shui Meng flew into a humiliation-driven rage. Someone actually dared to order him to strip? Shameless. You really think those dog paws of yours are fit to touch even the corner of my hem? Get the hell out. Woo! Woo! Peacock. You got a sharp beak. Now that the young master had spoken, the attendants in Loyalty Hall, also long since fed up with this facade, surged forth to clear out this pair of ordinary folk. They had no means by which to resist and were soundly kicked off the mountain. Big intestine Gongji's furious screechings echoed in the distance. Mo Ran, just you wait. I'm not done with you yet. Mo Ran stood outside Loyalty Hall and gazed at the night sky, his eyes curved in a smile as he sighed. Wow, I'm so scared. Shui Meng shot him a cold glare. What are you so scared of? They're salt merchants, Mo Ran said with genuine worry. I'm afraid that in the future, I won't get to have any more salt, of course. Shui Meng was silent for a moment. You really didn't screw that prostitute? Nope. And you really didn't steal from him? Nope. Shui Meng humphed. I don't believe you. Mo Ran raised a hand, laughing. Let the heavens strike me down with lightning, if I'm lying. Shui Meng abruptly lifted his hand and grabbed Mo Ran's arm in a vice grip. Mo Ran stared at him. What are you doing? Shui Meng humphed again and rapidly chanted an incantation. Scattered sounds were heard as a handful of beads, each about the size of a soybean, slipped out of Mo Ran's sleeve and fell to the ground. Shui Meng gathered spiritual energy in his hand and waved toward the beads, which glowed and grew in size until they turned into a pile of jewels and valuables. Plum blossom bracelets and jade earrings lay golden and sparkling on the ground. We're fellow disciples of the same sect, said Mo Ran after a pause. Don't make things difficult. Shui Meng glowered. Mo Wei Yu, have you no shame? No one's laughing with you, Shi Mei roared. Mo Ran sighed. It's not like I can cry on command. Shi Mei's face was dark. Is this how you use Xisheng's peak concealing technique? Mm-hmm. Practical application of knowledge and all that, you know. That salt merchant wasn't annoying much, so I didn't call you out in front of him, but he did get something right, Shi Mei angrily continued. To violate the rules against theft and lechery like you have is to ask for punishment, no matter which sect you're from. Mo Ran grinned, undaunted. And what are you going to do about it? Wait for Uncle to come back to tattle on me? He wasn't even worried. His uncle spoiled him to no end. At most, he would scold Mo Ran a little. He'd never have the heart to beat him. Shi Mei turned around, brushing his wind-blown hair aside, his eyes glinting with scorn in the dark of night. Dad? No, he's at Kunlun and won't be back for a month or two. Mo Ran's smile froze as an ominous feeling washed over him. He had suddenly remembered a certain person. But if he were here, then he would have been the one to receive Chang Gongji at Loyalty Hall, not the oblivious Madame Wang. That person couldn't be around, right? The flickering emotion in Mo Ran's eyes intensified Shi Mei's air of disdain. My father does spoil you too much, but isn't there a certain someone here at Xisheng Peak who doesn't coddle you? Mo Ran slowly backed away a few steps, a forced smile on his face. My esteemed cousin, it's so late already. Let's not disturb our elders' peace and quiet. I was wrong, and there won't be a next time. How about that? Please go get some rest. You look tired. And then he made a run for it. You've got to be kidding me. This Shi Mei guy is far too ruthless. At present, Mo Ran wasn't Tianjun, ruler of the mortal realm, so how could he risk falling into the hands of the individual in question? If that guy found out that he had stolen things and gone whoring, he'd probably break both of Mo Ran's legs. If he didn't run now, he wouldn't get another chance. That's the end of the freaking chapter. Okay. All right, sure. I was like, yeah, let's squeeze in chapter 5 because, like, you know, I want to get to the appearance of Shizun. And why do I feel... Oh, no, and we're right there. Ooh, that's a nasty cliffhanger, but it is 5:05, and I have to go. What a nasty little delightful cliffhanger. God damn it. But at least it's a Tuesday and not a Thursday, so I will be back. We're on page 67 for chapter 6 called This Venerable One's Shizun. We'll return on Thursday to... Oh, where's my bookmark? Thank you. We'll be back on Thursday to finally, I'm assuming, meet the Shizun of great renown at this point. I am deeply impressed. I am really enjoying this so far. She is a terrific writer. I know literally nothing about her personally. I know not a clue. So I am purely speaking as a writer. She is a terrific writer. Everything flows very well. She's had moments of description already that have just flung me into the sun. I think the only thing that I can think of at this moment, that which she might even get to later, obviously, so this is all with a big grain of salt, but I would imagine that someone would have a little bit more of a struggle and adjustment to being flung back to being 15, going on 16, instead of, you know, a suicidal man in his early 30s. I would think that transition would take a little bit more, but then again, we're so early that she very well could, and that just may be a me thing. And that's such a passing thought to me. Like, that's so, like, 2% of the overall. I'm so deeply impressed. I am very excited to keep going. This is extremely good. Oh man, I can already see the potential in why nobody will shut up about this. So I will see you on Thursday, where we get to pick this back up. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you are new here and you made it all the way to the end of the stream, you get bonus points. Hello, how are you? Once again, I am Brittany. This is Gaywatch. This is where we usually watch gay things, but every now and then we read something. And this is the something we're reading. So I hope you had a great time. I'm having a blast. And I will see you guys on Thursday, okay? Please, until then, take care of yourselves. And I will see you soon.